For 15 straight years, Marcellus left home every Friday at exactly 6:30 p.m. His wife, Tasha, thought it was harmless until the day she followed him. Tasha was 42 years old, married for 17 years, and she thought she knew her husband. Marcellus was the kind of man who kissed her forehead before bed, who never missed their son's basketball games, who brought her coffee every Sunday morning without asking. He was reliable, steady, safe. But every Friday, like clockwork, he'd say the same thing. Heading out to see the boys. Babe, be back around 10. And for 15 years, she believed him. If you've ever trusted someone completely, only to realize you might have been blind the whole time, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next will shake you to your core. Tasha worked as a medical assistant at a clinic in South Memphis. Long hours, low pay, aching feet. By the time she got home every evening, she was running on fumes. But she still made dinner, still checked homework, still made sure their 16-year-old son, Jaden, wasn't glued to his phone all night. Marcellus worked construction. He'd come home smelling like sawdust and sweat, shirt covered in dust, boots caked with dried mud. But he never complained. He'd shower, eat whatever Tasha made, and sit with Jaden to talk about school or girls or whatever teenage boys talk about with their dads. Their life was simple, predictable, comfortable. Friday nights, though, had their own rhythm. Around 6:15, Marcus would head upstairs. Tasha would hear the shower running, then the closet door opening and closing. He'd come back down wearing that same navy blue sweatshirt, faded, with a small bleach stain on the sleeve, and his old Timberlands. Heading out to see the boys. Babe, be back around 10. Drive safe, Tasha would say, barely looking up from folding laundry or wiping down the kitchen counter. And that was it. Every single Friday. For 15 years. She never questioned it. Not once. Because, why would she? Marcus wasn't the type to lie. He wasn't secretive or distant. He was present. He was hers. But looking back now, there were signs she'd ignored. Little things that didn't seem important at the time. Like how he always stopped at the same gas station on the way out. She knew because she'd see the receipts, sometimes same address, same timestamp, every Friday at 6:45 p.m. Or how he never smelled like alcohol when he came home. Not once. If he was really hanging with the boys, wouldn't there be beer on his breath, wing sauce on his shirt, something? And his phone. He never took it with him on Friday nights. He'd leave it on the kitchen counter, face down, like he didn't want to be disturbed. But Tasha didn't question it. Because Marcus wasn't the kind of man who gave her reasons to doubt him. He paid the bills on time. He never stayed out all night. He didn't hide things or act strange when she walked into a room. Dependable. The kind of husband her mother told her to pray for. So when her mind occasionally wandered, when she wondered where he really went, every Friday she pushed the thought away. Because doubt felt like betrayal. And Tasha wasn't the type of woman to doubt her man without proof. But then one Thursday night, while she was putting away his laundry, she found something in his jeans pocket. A receipt. Not from the gas station. From a motel. Her hands froze. Her breath caught in her throat. And everything she thought she knew started to crack. Tasha stood there in their bedroom, holding that crumpled piece of paper like it was evidence in a crime scene. Sunset Motel Room, 107, $65. Her hands started shaking. She read it again, and again, trying to make sense of it, trying to find an explanation that didn't make her stomach turn. Maybe it was old. Maybe he helped a friend who needed a place to stay. Maybe he lent his card to someone. Maybe. But the date was right there at the top. Last Friday. Tasha sat down on the edge of the bed, receipt still trembling in her hand, heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. Marcellus and Tasha had been together since they were 25. They built this life from nothing. They survived layoffs, hospital bills, his stepmother's death when Jaden was 5. They survived everything together. So why would he need a motel room? She wanted to march downstairs and confront him, throw the receipt in his face, and demand the truth right then and there. But something stopped her. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was pride, or maybe, deep down, she wasn't ready to hear the answer. So she folded the receipt, tucked it back into his pocket, and acted like nothing happened. But everything had changed. That night, at dinner, Tasha watched Marcellus like she was seeing him for the first time. The way he laughed at Jaden's jokes. The way he asked about her day. The way he reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Was he pretending? Had he always been pretending? She barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that receipt. That motel name. Room 107. The next morning, after Marcus left for work, Tasha called her best friend, Renee. "Girl, I need to talk. Can you meet me?" They met at Renee's place that Saturday afternoon. Renee poured her a glass of wine and sat across from her with that look, the one that said she already knew something was wrong. Tasha told her everything. The receipt, the motel, the 15 years of Friday nights. Renee didn't say anything at first. She just stared at Tasha, eyebrows raised, lips pressed tight. Then she leaned forward. "Tasha, you sure he's not cheating?" The words hit like a slap. "No," Tasha said quickly. "Marcus wouldn't do that. He's not that type of man." "Not? What type?" "A man?" Renee shook her head slowly. "Baby, I love you. But 15 years of weekly trips to a motel? That's not a poker game. That's not hanging with the boys. That's something else." Tasha wanted to argue, to defend him, to say Renee was wrong. But she couldn't. Because deep down, she'd been thinking the same thing. "So what do I do?" Tasha whispered, her voice cracking. Renee reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You follow him." Tasha's eyes widened. "Follow him?" "Next Friday," Renee said firmly. "You leave work early." "You deserve to know." Tasha sat there, staring into her wineglass, feeling her entire world tilt. Follow him. The thought made her sick, made her feel desperate and paranoid and pathetic. But what choice did she have? She couldn't ask him directly, because if she was wrong, she'd destroy his trust. And if she was right, she didn't want to think about that. So she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll follow him." Tasha didn't sleep that whole week. Every time she looked at Marcellus, she saw a stranger. A man she thought she knew, but maybe never did. He was the same as always, kissing her goodbye before work, texting her during his lunch break, asking what she wanted for dinner. But now, every gesture felt like a performance. Every smile felt like a mask hiding something darker underneath. By Thursday night, Tasha had made up her mind. She was going to follow him. She didn't tell Renee she was actually going through with it. Didn't tell anyone, because saying it out loud would make it real. And part of her still hoped she was wrong. Still hoped there was some innocent explanation she just couldn't see yet. Friday morning came. Tasha woke up with a knot in her stomach. She got ready for work, made breakfast, packed Jaden's lunch, all on autopilot. Marcellus kissed her forehead before leaving. "Have a good day, babe." She forced a smile. "You too." The hours at the clinic dragged. Every minute felt like an hour. Tasha kept checking the clock, her hands shaking every time she took a patient's blood pressure. At 5 p.m., she told her supervisor she wasn't feeling well. "You okay, Tasha?" her coworker asked. "Just a headache," Tasha lied. "I need to go home." She drove home, but she didn't go inside. Instead, she parked down the street, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel, and she waited. At 6:20, Marcellus came out of the house. Navy sweatshirt, Timberlands, keys in hand. He got into his truck, backed out of the driveway, and headed toward the highway. Tasha's heart was racing. Her hands were sweating, but she followed. She stayed 2 cars behind him, just like she'd seen in movies. Every turn he made, she made. Every light he stopped at, she stopped. Her mind was screaming at her to turn around, to go home, to trust him. But her gut told her to keep going. Marcellus pulled onto the highway, heading east. Tasha followed. Her breath shallow, her chest tight. 20 minutes later, he took an exit. She'd driven past 100 times, but never really noticed. The kind of road with potholes, overgrown weeds, and a faded sign that read, "Sunset, Motel Vacancy." Tasha's stomach dropped. She watched Marcellus' blue pickup pull into the parking lot and stop in front of a door marked 107, the same number from the receipt. Tasha parked across the street, engine still running, hands gripping the wheels so tight her knuckles turned white. And then she watched. Marcellus got out of his truck. He didn't look around, didn't check his phone. He just walked up to that door, knocked twice, and waited. The door opened. Tasha couldn't see who was inside. The angle was wrong. But Marcellus stepped in, and the door closed behind him. And just like that, 15 years of trust shattered into a million pieces. Tasha sat there, frozen, staring at that closed door. Her mind raced with images she didn't want to see. Another woman, a secret life, a betrayal so deep it would destroy everything. She thought about Jaden, about their house, about the promises Marcellus made on their wedding day. And she thought about herself. Had she been a fool this whole time? Would you confront him now? Or wait for proof? Drop a comment below, because what Tasha did next took more courage than she knew she had. She glanced at the clock on her dashboard. 6:52 p.m. Marcellus usually came home around 10. That meant she had hours to sit here and spiral. Hours to imagine every nightmare scenario. But Tasha couldn't wait hours. She couldn't sit in this car, drowning in doubt and fear, while her husband was in that room doing God knows what. She turned off the engine, opened the car door, and started walking toward room 107. Every step Tasha took toward that motel room felt heavier than the last. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were cold. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode out of her chest. The Sunset Motel was run down, peeling paint on the doors, cracked concrete walkway, a flickering neon sign that buzzed in the evening air. The kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Tasha reached room 107 and stopped. She could hear something inside, faint voices, movement, and music. Gospel music. The kind her grandmother used to play on Sunday mornings. Soft, soulful. The sound of old hymns about grace and mercy. Tasha's mind spun. Why would there be gospel music playing in a motel room? She raised her fist to knock, but hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if this was all some misunderstanding, and she was about to humiliate herself? But what if she was right? What if Marcus was in there with another woman, and she walked away now without knowing the truth? She thought about 15 years of Friday nights. 15 years of seeing the boys. 15 years of trust, and she knocked. 2 sharp knocks. The music stopped. Tasha heard footsteps. Slow, hesitant. The door opened, and there he was, Marcellus, her husband, standing in a dim motel room, eyes wide with shock, mouth open like he'd just seen a ghost. "Tasha," he whispered. But Tasha wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking past him, at the woman sitting in a wheelchair near the window, an older black woman, maybe in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and tired, kind eyes that looked up at Tasha with confusion and fear. Tasha's mind went blank. This wasn't what she expected. This wasn't a young woman. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't some secret girlfriend. This was someone else. Someone fragile. Someone who looked like she'd been through hell and back. Who? Tasha's voice came out as a whisper. Who is she? Marcellus's face crumbled. His shoulders sagged. He looked at Tasha with an expression she'd never seen before. Guilt, shame, and something deeper, pain. "Tasha, I can explain," he said, his voice shaking. "Then explain," Tasha said, her voice stronger now, anger rising in her chest. "Explain why you've been coming to a motel every Friday for 15 years. Explain why there's a woman in a wheelchair in this room. Explain why you've been lying to me." Marcellus stepped toward Tasha, his eyes filling with tears. "This is my mother," he said quietly. Tasha blinked. "Your mother?" He nodded. Tasha felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Marcellus, your mother is dead," she said, her voice rising. "I was at the funeral. I held you while you cried. That was my stepmother," Marcellus interrupted, his voice cracking. "The woman who raised me. The woman you knew." He pointed at the woman in the wheelchair. "This," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is my real mother." Tasha stared at him, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "Her name is Dorothy," Marcellus continued. "She left when I was 8 years old. I didn't see her again until 17 years ago." Tasha looked at the woman Dorothy, who was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I've been taking care of her," Marcellus said. "Every Friday. For 15 years. Tasha's hands went to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Marcellus looked at her. Broken. "Because I was ashamed," he said. And in that moment, Tasha realized that the man she'd been married to for 17 years had been carrying a secret so heavy, it had been crushing him all along. If you've ever felt this kind of betrayal, that moment where everything you thought you knew turned out to be something completely different, subscribe now, because what happened next will break your heart. Tasha stood frozen in the doorway of room 107, her mind trying to catch up with what her eyes were seeing. Dorothy Marcellus' real mother sat in her wheelchair near the window, hands trembling in her lap, head bowed like she was praying for the floor to swallow her whole. The room was small and dim, a single bed with faded floral sheets, a mini fridge humming quietly in the corner, a portable electric stove on a small table near the bathroom. The smell of vegetable soup hung in the air, mixed with the faint scent of lavender cleaning spray. On the nightstand sat a small radio, still playing gospel music softly. Next to it was a worn Bible, bookmarked with a thin purple ribbon. This wasn't a love nest. This wasn't a secret affair. This was someone's home. A sad, humble, hidden home. Tasha's anger began to shift into something else. Confusion, hurt, and underneath it all, a terrible, creeping guilt. "Come in," Marcellus said quietly, stepping aside. "Please." Tasha hesitated, then stepped inside. The door closed behind her, and suddenly the room felt even smaller. She looked at Dorothy again, really looked at her. The older woman's face was gaunt, her cheekbones sharp. Her hands were spotted with age, thin and fragile. She wore a faded purple cardigan over a clean white nightgown, and there was a blanket draped across her legs, handmade, crocheted, the kind that took hours to make. Dorothy finally looked up, and when her eyes met Tasha's, she spoke. "I'm sorry," Dorothy whispered, her voice raspy and weak. "I'm so sorry." Tasha didn't know what to say. She turned to Marcellus, tears streaming down her face now. "Explain," she said. "From the beginning. I need to understand." Marcellus nodded. He pulled out a folding chair and motioned for Tasha to sit. She did, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her up. Marcellus knelt down in front of her, his hands on his knees, and he began to talk. "When I was 8 years old," he said, his voice quiet and steady, "my mother left. Just disappeared one day. My dad told me she didn't want us anymore, that she chose drugs and the streets over her family." Tasha glanced at Dorothy, who was crying silently now, her face turned toward the window. "I hated her for years," Marcellus continued. "I grew up angry. My dad remarried when I was 12. And that woman, the one you knew, the one we buried, she raised me. She was good to me. She was my mom in every way that mattered. He paused, swallowing hard. But 17 years ago, right before you and I got married, I got a call from a hospital. They said they had a Jane Doe patient who'd been in a car accident. No ID. No family. Nothing. But when she woke up, she kept saying my name over and over. Tasha's chest tightened. It was her. Marcellus said, nodding toward Dorothy. She'd been living on the streets for years, struggling with addiction, and that accident, it left her with a stroke. She couldn't walk. Could barely speak at first. The doctor said she'd need full-time care. So you brought her here? Tasha asked, her voice shaking. I didn't know what else to do, Marcellus said, tears rolling down his face now. The hospital was going to move her to a state facility. One of those places where people go to die. And I couldn't let that happen. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But I also couldn't bring her home, Tasha. I couldn't look at her every day and not feel angry, hurt, abandoned. Tasha looked at Dorothy again, and this time she saw something she hadn't seen before. Shame. Dorothy wasn't just fragile. She was broken. Broken by life, by choices, by consequences. So every Friday, Marcellus whispered, I come here. I bring her groceries. I cook her dinner. I clean the room. I sit with her. And sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. We just exist. Tasha's tears fell faster now. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Marcellus looked at her, his face full of pain. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of what? Tasha asked, her voice breaking. Marcellus stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. He stared out at the parking lot, his shoulders tense, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Ashamed that I couldn't forgive her, he said quietly. Ashamed that, even after all these years, I still felt angry. Ashamed that I was spending money we didn't always have to keep her here, instead of in some state home where she'd be forgotten. He turned to face Tasha, tears streaming down his face. And ashamed, he continued, that I wasn't strong enough to be the man you thought I was. What does that mean? It means, Marcellus said, his voice cracking, that I wanted to be the kind of man who could forgive, the kind of man who could let go of the past and move forward. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I saw that 8-year-old boy who watched his mother walk out the door and never come back. He walked over to Dorothy and placed a hand on her shoulder. She reached up and held it, crying softly. But I also couldn't abandon her, Marcellus said. Because no matter what she did, she's still my mother, and I couldn't live with myself if I just walked away. Tasha felt her heart breaking in a way she'd never felt before. Not from betrayal, but from understanding. Marcellus had been carrying this burden alone for 15 years. 15 years of hiding. 15 years of shame. 15 years of trying to be two different people, the man his wife needed him to be, and the son his mother needed him to be. Why didn't you trust me? Tasha whispered. Why didn't you think I'd understand? Marcellus looked at her, his face twisted in pain. Because I didn't understand it myself, he said. How could I explain to you something I couldn't even explain to myself? How could I tell you I was visiting the woman who abandoned me? The woman I swore I'd never forgive, and expect you to be okay with it? Tasha walked over to him and took his face in her hands. Because I'm your wife, she said firmly. Because we're supposed to share everything. The good and the bad. The easy and the hard. Marcellus closed his eyes, fresh tears falling. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Tasha pulled him into her arms, and he collapsed against her, sobbing. She held him, her own tears falling onto his shoulder, and for the first time in 15 years, Marcellus let himself break. Dorothy watched them, her face full of grief and gratitude. After a long moment, Tasha pulled back and looked at Marcellus. I'm hurt, she said honestly. I'm angry that you lied. I'm angry that you didn't trust me. But I understand why you did it. She turned to Dorothy. And I want to help. Dorothy's eyes widened. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Tasha said gently. But if Marcellus has been taking care of you, then I want to be a part of that. Because that's what family does. Marcellus stared at his wife, disbelief and hope flooding his face. You mean that? Tasha nodded. I mean it. She pulled out the folding chair and sat down in front of Dorothy. She reached out and took the older woman's trembling hands in hers. Tell me about yourself, Tasha said softly. I want to know who you are. Dorothy looked at Marcellus, then back at Tasha, tears streaming down her face, and slowly she began to talk. She told Tasha about her childhood in Mississippi, about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about falling in love with Marcellus's father and having Marcellus when she was just 19. She told her about the addiction that started with pills after a car accident, about how it spiraled into something she couldn't control, about the shame that made her run instead of ask for help. She told her about the years on the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness, and she told her about the accident that almost killed her and about waking up in a hospital bed to find her son, the boy she'd abandoned, sitting beside her, holding her hand. I don't deserve him, Dorothy whispered, looking at Marcellus. I don't deserve any of this. Tasha squeezed her hands. Maybe not, she said gently. But he keeps showing up anyway, and that's what love is. She looked at Marcellus, who was watching her with tears in his eyes. That's what real love is, Tasha repeated. Would you forgive him if you were in her shoes? Drop a comment and let us know, because what happened next changed all of them forever. The drive home that night was silent. Tasha sat in the passenger seat of Marcellus's truck, staring out the window, her mind racing. Marcellus gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight, his eyes red from crying. When they pulled into the driveway, neither of them moved. Finally, Tasha spoke. I need time, she said quietly. Marcellus nodded. I understand. I'm not saying I'm leaving you, Tasha continued, her voice shaking. But I need time to process this, to figure out how I feel, because right now, I don't know if I'm more hurt or more confused. I know, Marcellus whispered. Take all the time you need. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, both staring at the ceiling in the dark, neither of them sleeping. The next few days were hard. Tasha moved through the house like a ghost. She made breakfast, went to work, came home, but she barely spoke to Marcellus. Not because she was angry, but because she didn't know what to say. On Wednesday evening, Tasha sat down with Jaden and told him everything. At first, Jaden didn't believe her. Dad's been doing what? He asked, his eyes wide. Tasha explained it all: the motel, Dorothy, the 15 years of secrets. Jaden sat there, stunned. So, I have a grandmother I've never met? Tasha nodded. Jaden looked at his hands, processing. Is Dad okay? He asked quietly. Tasha felt her heart clench. I don't know, she admitted. But we're going to figure it out. Together. That Friday, Tasha made a decision. She got in her car and drove to the Sunset Motel. Marcellus's truck was already there. She knocked on room 107. When Marcellus opened the door, he looked shocked. Tasha, I want to help, she said simply. Marcellus stared at her. You don't have to. I know, Tasha interrupted. But I want to. She stepped inside. Dorothy was sitting by the window, same as before. When she saw Tasha, her face crumpled. I'm so sorry, Dorothy whispered. I never meant to cause problems between you two. Tasha walked over and knelt down in front of her. You didn't cause the problems, Tasha said gently. The secrets did. But we're going to fix that. Starting now. Over the next hour, the three of them talked. Really talked. Marcellus explained how much the motel cost each month, how he paid for Dorothy's medications, how he'd been doing it all alone because he was too ashamed to ask for help. Tasha listened, and when he was done, she made a plan. We're going to move her, Tasha said. Marcellus blinked. What? We're going to find her a proper place, Tasha said firmly. A care facility. Somewhere clean and safe, where she can have dignity. Where she can be around people. Where she's not just existing. Tasha, we can't afford. We'll figure it out, Tasha interrupted. We'll cut back on other things. We'll make it work. Because this, she gestured around the small, dim motel room, this isn't living. Dorothy started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief. Marcellus looked at his wife, his eyes full of love and gratitude. Thank you, he whispered. Tasha stood up and took his hand. We're a team, she said. We should have been doing this together from the start. Marcellus pulled her into his arms and held her tight. And for the first time in weeks, Tasha felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. That night, Tasha and Marcellus sat down with Jaden again. We're going to bring you to meet your grandmother, Tasha said. Jaden nodded slowly. Okay, he said. I want to meet her. The next Sunday, they went together, all three of them. And when Jaden walked into that motel room and saw Dorothy for the first time, he didn't hesitate. He walked right up to her, knelt down, and hugged her. Hi, Grandma, he said softly. Dorothy sobbed, wrapping her thin arms around him. And Marcellus, standing in the doorway, broke down crying, because after 15 years of hiding, his family was finally whole. 2 weeks later, Tasha and Marcellus found a care facility on the east side of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean. It had nurses on staff, a common room with a TV and plants, and other residents Dorothy's age. It had dignity. Moving Dorothy out of the Sunset Motel was emotional. She'd lived in room 107 for 15 years. It was the only stability she'd known in decades. But when Marcellus wheeled her into her new room with its big window, soft bedding, and framed picture of her and Marcellus that Tasha had printed, Dorothy cried tears of joy. Thank you, she whispered, holding both their hands. Thank you. Tasha and Marcellus visited her twice a week. Sometimes Jaden came too. Slowly, Dorothy started to come alive again. She joined the other residents for meals. She started attending the Bible study group. She even laughed. Sometimes a sound Marcellus said he hadn't heard since he was a child. At home, things were different too. Tasha and Marcellus started going to therapy. They talked about trust, about communication, about how to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy. There were hard conversations, moments of anger and frustration, nights where Tasha still felt hurt by the years of lies. But they kept showing up, for each other, for Dorothy, for their family. One evening, about 3 months after everything came out, Tasha and Marcellus sat on their porch, watching the sun set. I'm sorry, Marcellus said quietly. For everything. Tasha took his hand. I know, she said. And I forgive you. Marcellus looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude. I don't deserve you. Tasha smiled softly. Maybe not, she teased. But you're stuck with me anyway. They laughed. And for the first time in months, it felt genuine, real. I love you, Marcellus said. I love you too, Tasha replied. They started having Sunday dinners together, Tasha, Marcellus, Jaden, and Dorothy, when she felt strong enough to leave the facility. Those dinners became sacred. A time to reconnect, to laugh, to heal. Dorothy would tell stories about Marcellus as a boy, about his first day of school, about how he used to sing in the bathtub, about the dreams she'd once had for him. And Marcellus would listen, holding her hand, finally able to see her, not just as the woman who left, but as the woman who was trying every single day to make up for it. One Sunday, Dorothy looked around the table at her family, her son, her daughter-in-law, her grandson, and she smiled. I never thought I'd have this, she said softly. I never thought I'd get a second chance. Tasha reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We all deserve second chances, she said. And in that moment, surrounded by love and forgiveness, Dorothy finally believed it. Dorothy passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in March, exactly 1 year after moving into the care facility. Marcellus was holding her hand when it happened. Tasha was there too, standing beside him. Dorothy looked at Marcellus one last time, her eyes clear and peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up on me." And then she closed her eyes and was gone. At the funeral, it was small. Just Tasha, Marcellus, Jaden, and a few people from the care facility who'd grown to love Dorothy in her final year. Marcellus stood at the graveside and spoke. "My mother made mistakes," he said, his voice steady. "Big ones. Mistakes that hurt me for years. But she also taught me something I didn't realize. Until recently." He looked at Tasha. "She taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're ashamed, even when you don't think you deserve it." After the funeral, Marcellus and Tasha sat in the car for a long time, holding hands. "You okay?" Tasha asked. Marcellus nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." Because he'd done what he needed to do. He'd shown up. He'd loved his mother even when it hurt. And in the end, that was enough. So here's what we all learned from Marcellus and Dorothy's story. Sometimes, what looks like betrayal is just someone hiding their pain. Sometimes, the people we love are carrying weights we can't see. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is simply showing up, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when you don't have all the answers. Would you have reacted differently? Would you have forgiven him? Drop a comment below and let us know what you think. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about love, forgiveness, and second chances, hit that subscribe button. Because we all have secrets, we all have pain, and we all need reminders that love is worth fighting for. Thank you for watching this story. And remember, the people you love are fighting battles you know nothing about. Be kind, be patient, and always, always show up.